everybody, to today's presentation. I'm Karen Storwick. I'm the Vice President and Director of Communications for RAUSI, the Royal Alberta United Services Institute. For those of you who are unfamiliar with RAUSI, we're a Canadian-based forum for discussions on trending topics as they relate to global security and defense. We date back to 1920 when RAUSI began as a think tank and then evolved into a service organization for veterans through the decades following the wars. And recently, RAUSI has evolved back into a think tank, publishing original articles, generating discussion on social media platforms, hosting a speakers series to amplify discourse on security and defense. And today's presentation is part of our Rocky Mountain Conference on Security and Defense. Joe Howard will be moderating today's presentation. He will introduce our speakers, and we will have questions at the end. Joe, over to you.
Thank you, Karen. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon, good evening, good morning, depending on where you are. Thank you very much for taking the time to attend. We have three distinguished speakers who, in no order of precedence, but just from memory, is Theo ten Haaf, Lech Majewski, and Yuri Kovilov from the Netherlands, from Poland, and from Romania, respectively. Each of these gentlemen have played senior roles in NATO, and they are all obviously situated in Europe. The purpose of today's fireside chat is to have a free-flowing exchange of thoughts among our three guests as to what comprises the process by which their respective national security strategy evolves. You will be aware that in September, we hosted representatives from the United States, Dr. Tom Wright and Lieutenant General Mark Schwartz from Brookings and Rand, respectively, who were co-authors of Joe Biden's 2022 National Security Strategy. In October, we hosted Vincent Rigby and Todd Strickland. Vincent Rigby having been the National Director of Security and Intelligence advising the Prime Minister, and Todd Strickland, former Commandant of Canadian Forces College, who spoke about Canada's process. Whilst the Americans were highly disciplined and their content was coherent, Canada lacked a process and has no strategy. And that's not an editorial comment, that's just the way it is. Today, we're going to see what happens in other NATO countries. And this will serve as an introduction to our fourth and final event in January, when we intend to host representatives from the European Council and from NATO as to how do they assimilate and process all these national security strategies that are forthcoming from their respective member states. To that end, I'd like to turn the floor over to Theo. If you would be kind enough to kickstart our fireside chat and tell us something about the Dutch process and what might make it unique and distinguished from other processes. Theo, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Joe. First of all, also from my side, welcome everybody of the audience, and I hope it will be a good learning experience and a good communication experience tonight. Looking forward to the discussion with you. In the Netherlands, the basis for strategy is we have a security strategy of the Kingdom of the Netherlands. And what I already like to point out, the Kingdom of the Netherlands is not only in Europe. We also have islands in the Caribbean, and actually islands bordering Venezuela. So you see that our strategic perspective is not only European-centric, but also with a very close look to the area in the Caribbean, which is, of course, now also a situation developing. This security strategy of the Kingdom of the Netherlands is how do you call it, a reiterating process. It's the current strategy is from 2023 to 2029. And it's an all-hazards strategy. That means it addresses security aspects, but also safety aspects. For example, what do we do with large flooding? and the strategy is based on international rule of law and the human rights. And the strategy gives broad lines. What are the threats? What's the strategic direction the Netherlands has to take? What are the handling and it gives the direction for handling and steering for the department. But it's up to the departments themselves to go deeper and develop their own strategies. So, for example, the Dutch defense has a defense strategy. What the process of this national security strategy is also it has a 3-year cycle, so every 3 years it's updated. So the next one is in 2026. And each year, twice a year, we have a trend analysis. It's a kind of going along the line saying, okay, when we wrote it, what has changed? Do we need to address already very quickly? So it's kind of flexible model. So 3-year cycle, twice a year, the trend analysis, and it has a 6-year outlook. What are the main aims? It's a strategy that's both external and internal. Of course, the main aim is to have a safe and secure Netherlands, and that in a multipolar world. But it also strives for a resilient democracy and a resilient society. And in the strategy, working lines are worked out. I won't mention them all, but to give you an idea of some of the lines, it's investing in international partnerships and strengthening defense. So we invest in NATO and the EU. We also put ourselves into the 5% goal of NATO. But it also has lines as strengthening resilience of economy, strengthening resilience of social stability, and but also intensifying on climate adaptation and mitigation, so pandemics, and also crisis management operation and readiness for the internal security. So, like I said, it's an all-hazard strategy we follow. I would leave it for the moment with this, Joe.
All right, Yuri, may I turn the floor over to you, please?
Yes, thank you very much. Welcome everybody from Romania. Speaking about national defense strategy, how it's called in Romania. In Romania was approved yesterday, and we have a new national defense strategy up to 2030. Why? Because the process is like this. The president, which doesn't have too many attributes on the domestic policy, he is the commander-in-chief of the armed forces, the president of the Supreme Council of National Defense, and after president sworn into office, he has maximum 6 months to present the national defense strategy. The national defense strategy, which has to be validated by the Supreme Council of National Defense, and after that to be approved by the Parliament. And yesterday, the national defense strategy was approved by the Parliament. For the first time after 1990, this year the national defense strategy was in for about 15 days. They put it on the public debate. It's been the first time in the history when the national defense strategy has been in the public debate, and according to the official statement, they took into account many of the many proposals from the civil society, NGOs, academia, and other entities. This strategy proposes a driving idea independence in solidarity. What means independence in solidarity means that Romania will act with confidence in its own capabilities, but anchored in alliances and partnerships, especially NATO, the EU, and the strategic partnership with the United States. At the same time, the strategy emphasizes that the main actor is the citizen. It's the first time when the citizen Romanians are they are put in the first place as the main actors, and the strategy the intent is, I would say the intent is to have to be a partnership with the nation, and most probably the success depends on internal unity and public dialogue sustained by the Romanians. The economy is seen as the foundation of the security, and the declared ambition of nowadays strategy is Romania to project its regional influence and aspire to the status of the main power of Southeastern Europe. And I will stop here, and I will continue after that, if you agree.
Thanks, Yuri. Oleg, can you describe what the process that transpires in Poland, mentioning perhaps any similarities or dissimilarities with our two other guests? Oleg?
Yes, thank you, John. Good evening, everyone. This is great to be here together with you. For Poland, I would like to underline the process of making national security strategy is very important. And at this process, people from different government office, from different government institutions are involved in the drafting. That is very important. The Polish state process is developing, evolve, and fluctuate. On the other hand, it's a very long process, especially recently, when the geopolitical situation is very complicated and changing very quickly, especially for us, for Poland, and I'm sure that for the EU and for all of the world. What is the main reason? The main reason, in my opinion, is Russia and war together against Ukraine. And on the other hand, the technological revolution, who is making very quickly changing world and economical world, global problems is, especially last time, is customs duties. And that means the main important government office is making this process. The most important is Council of Ministers. This council is responsible for the development and adoption new national security. And they are working together with Minister of Defense, from Minister of Defense, Department of Defense Strategy and Planning, and of course, Polish General Staff, Department of Strategic Planning Board, and of course, finally, National Security Bureau. And President of Poland should adopt a law. It's process. It's a long process. I think it's maybe sometimes too long process, but very important for country and especially very important for defense policy. In Poland, very important is supported by several external pillars. They are for us very important is international security cooperation too. It means that NATO, EU, Polish-American partnership, and regional cooperation. The most important is Polish-American partnership and EU partnership. These are the ways and means for improving Polish and regional European security. I would like to say that Poland always recognized the Russian threat. That means that we started 25 ago to spending 2% of our GDP on security and defense. But last time we spent about 5% Polish GDP. It is about 200 billion złotych. Approximately, it's about $50 billion. That means that we have a lot of money for the Polish army is experiencing a significant transformation, especially increase very new technology, new armament for different armed forces, and additionally, Poland is unique in being both a host country and a contributing nation to NATO and face forward presence. Especially it's important in the current geopolitical situation. We are working ever closer with the United States and the European Union. We are allocating more and more funds to the process of transformation of the Polish armed forces. And you are working on further version of strategic document, especially last time. This process is very important for us, is disciplined and grounded the law. For example, the most important document is national security strategy, but another is Directive National Defense Strategy and National Military Strategy. That means that Poland process is underdeveloped every time. About this reason, especially difficult situation in the war. That especially last time, in August 2025, we prepared the new proposal. Government Council of Ministers adopt new proposition, the National Security Strategy of the Republic of Poland. And at present, this new proposition is in President of Poland and is ready to sign and take new strategy.
Lech, can I just ask a question? You've mentioned that you have a certain strength of relationship with the United States. Is your process modeled on the United States? You mentioned that you start out with a national security strategy, then that evolves into a national defense, and then a national military strategy, which is the same model as the United States. Is this just a coincidence, or is there a underlying consulting arrangement, if you will, between the United States and Poland?
Interesting question. The United States is one of the most strategic partners to the port, but you are working together very closely with EU, and we have very big support from US and from EU and NATO, of course, too.
Right.
But for us, the most important question is Polish security. And the biggest, more convinced defense system that I told we spent, especially last time, a lot of money for the defense system in Poland. For us, maybe it's easier at this time because we have very good economical time.
Yeah. Let me switch over to Theo and Yuri. How much influence, if any, does the U.S. process have on your own respective processes? Is the Dutch process a purely made in the Netherlands process? And likewise with Romania, recognizing that the content of the processes eventually end up on one desk, namely the desk of the Defense and Planning Committee, Planning and Policy Committee at NATO. If there isn't synergy in the process, can we still expect synergy in the content? Theo, got any thoughts?
Yeah, the process is our own. It's a Dutch process, but of course it's aligned with, let's say, the NATO defense planning process when it comes to defense strategy. And it depends on EU guidelines. For example, the complete, not the military, but you are only allowed to have a 3% shortage of your national budgets. So these are things that are so it's a Dutch process, but it looks outside and also inside, and it looks at the main developments that's going on in the world, what the organization doing. And for example, the NATO pledge is also a clear example. We signed to it, and now it's part of our strategy as well for the coming years.
Okay. Yuri?
So speaking about Romanian national defense strategy, it's a Romanian process, but at the same time, as Theo mentioned, is aligned with NATO defense planning process. Yeah, it has to be aligned. Yeah, because in terms of content, yeah, it covers the security context, covers threats, risks, vulnerabilities, opportunities, also covers the national security interests, national security objectives, the implementation and monitoring aspects. And also there are similarities with what Theo mentioned before. Why? Because they departments are going to write down their own papers, going deeper into the subject. The Ministry of Defense will issue the white paper on defense in no maximum than 3 months after the strategy is approved, and other departments have their own deadlines as well.
Okay, well, so my next question concerns the activity at NATO and at the Planning and Security Council Committee within the EU. The process by which their product evolves is consensus. That in NATO, there has to be consensus, and likewise in the EU. And one of the observations is that consensus does not always yield the optimum collective response. It's a saddle point. It's the best of the worst or the worst of the best. And we'll ask another question in January of officials from those two organizations. But excuse me, after Poland, Romania, well, after all member states get the feedback from the treaty regime, do they have to, how do you react to it? You said, you know, we pushed forward a particular strategy, or the Polish strategy, or the Romanian, or the Dutch. But what's coming back as to what our treaty obligations are, something completely different. How do you reconcile that, Theo?
This is a thing I would like to was about to bring up as well. Strategy is not constant. I mean, it's a constant in developing, but you look outside. And for example, what I mean is the world, and that's what our strategy is of a national interest, but we're not alone. We are in NATO and EU, and we take care and look at these developments. But for example, the important lines you see now is that we have now more multipolar world, and power politics are back. And there's less focus on international law and order. The pace, and I think Lek was mentioning as well, the pace of change is accelerating, whether it's with AI, with technology. The cognitive dimension is really becoming very important. We are influenced by everything that's happening on the internet, and sometimes, for example, the Tate brothers, they have 40 million followers. And I think that's the biggest one, and that will be something to address in a new strategy next year. The transatlantic bond is changing. And the big question is, are we now for a permanent change? Or is this only with this administration? Because you really have to react and to review what do all these developments do for our strategy. Is it still valid, or do we need to adapt? And so we're not following as sheep things that are happening in the world. No, we look at it, we analyze it, and then we form our mind. And when we want to address certain things like security aspects, the NATO remains a pillar for our strategy. But for example, I'm in the International Advisory Council of International Affairs in the Netherlands. But for example, we advocated for a more robust and more independent role of Europe, to have a larger European part in NATO, that if the US is not following us, we can still do it on our own with a coalition of the willing. Exactly the discussions we now have with whether we should contribute to Ukraine, whether we get a ceasefire or not.
Yeah. Yeah. Yuri, can you comment on that? Then I'll move back to Lek.
Yeah. So I do agree, and this is probably the main point. The national defense strategy or national security strategy, how it's called in other states, has to be based on national interests. Yeah. So this is the starting point when a strategy is developed. It has to be based on national interest. I will give you just a couple of examples from our national defense strategy, which is called Independence and Solidarity, Romanian Vision for a Changing World. This is the name of the new strategy. Speaking about security context, the strategy starts from a realistic assessment of the environment. Yeah, instability in the Black Sea region and Western Balkans. The action of the Russian Federation that affect Romania's interests are explicitly mentioned. I'm talking about A2AD in the Black Sea since 2014, regional destabilization, airspace violations, hybrid instruments used intensively by Russian Federation in the last 2 years, at least, yeah. Speaking about threats, risk, vulnerabilities, and opportunities, yeah, it covers internal vulnerabilities. Corruption is specifically mentioned. Also, dysfunctions in health, education, social protection and administration, cyber risks, and others. Also, when we speak about national security interests, everything starts with our national security interest. So this is how our Romanian national defense strategy is constructed and is written. Even though sometimes it's difficult to achieve the consensus on the text. Why? Because we have, strong opposition, which sometimes do not agree with some elements in the text. Also, academia, NGOs, and other entities have commented on the first draft. Some of them have been taken into account, others not. But at the end of the day, the strategy is approved by the parliament. And in this case, once it's approved, everyone has to apply it and to put all the efforts in order to achieve those objectives.
Well, two of you have spoken about vital national interests, and I'm going to get picky, but a vital national interest is only vital if there's opposite, there is a threat. You can't have a vital national interest without a threat to make it vital. And I'm just curious, two of you have, I think, more Lech for sure, and Yuri more so, but Theo less, have actually enunciated that we take into account the external threat, particularly from Russia. So, which leads into the question, how much consideration is given to the external threat when you're developing your own national security strategy and inherently the vital national interests which that threat threatens? Lech, can you take the ball on that? Then we'll go back to our other two guests.
Yes, it's really very important that sovereignty and vital Polish national interest is the most important for us. But on the other hand, in the context of European security process, especially in the last time, we are very close to thinking similar to EU, European Union, that the sovereignty and interest the security issues are discussed very often in EU. For example, of the European Council and European Commission discuss these problems, and Prime Minister from Poland underline every time this topic, and European Union prepared a lot of support, different support for military defense budget. We have a lot of money to take new military programs, to new military systems, special air defense system for new armament, and especially for the aircraft, new F-35. Our country last time bought F-35 system. Romania bought F-16, and especially for the Poland and for the EU, the key areas for the common security strategy will be new technology. For example, new digital technology, cyber threats,
right,
protection of critical infrastructure. Yes, and for production new technology with different countries in Europe. For new program from Europe, we receive additional 35 billion euro. It's big money for the new technology to build together new factory in Poland, to cooperate with different countries from EU and make bigger power for defending our country. Poland country, especially for Polish, is very important because you are very close to the biggest threat, very
That's
close
right.
to Russia.
Yeah. But Yuri, you're a little bit more removed. Well, I guess you're not removed because you're on the Black Sea. But do you take into account, or how much do you take into account the threat the threat against vital national interests when you're developing your own national security strategy and the derivative strategies?
Like mentioned, the issue, I mean, topics discussed in the EU framework. Yeah, there are many topics discussed in the EU framework which has to be taken into account. Sometimes it's not easy to reach a consensus. There are many, let's say, different points of view, but even at the EU level, each country is fighting according to its national interests, which should prevail. Yeah, definitely there are red lines. One country could accept 1, 2, 3 points, but no more, and then the process will start again, the negotiation process. Yeah. And I will give you just one example. Like mentioned until you as well, the Russian-Ukrainian conflict. Yeah, the Russian-Ukrainian conflict is seen differently from Romania than from the Netherlands, from Poland as well, and I'm sure that totally different from Canada or from Portugal. Yeah. Having common border with Ukraine, we perceive the threat differently, and we look at this conflict in a different way. Yeah, for Poland, it's almost the same story. For the Netherlands, probably is little bit different. Why? Because the Netherlands is facing other kind of threats, hybrid threats, cyber, and others. Yeah, and this is how I see this issue. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but our security strategy starts with the threats. And of course, it's it's an analyzing the threats, and it's not only the military threats. And military, we see Russia as the biggest threat, but it's also the hybrid threats, the cyber threats, but also what are the climate threats facing us? Or terrorism is another thing. I told you it's a comprehensive security and safety, and we look at threats in a whole range of things, even the threats to our critical infrastructure, for example. So I think, and for the audience as well, when we talk, the defense strategy is much more military threat focused, but the security strategy of the Netherlands, that's focused on the whole gamut of threats a country can face. Then, of course, some specifics in our position when it comes to large flooding, for example.
Yeah. Well, if we flip back to one vital national interest, for example, security of energy, it's pretty important. And the Russian supply has impacted all of Europe in one way or another. But it strikes me, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that most European states are withdrawing their need from Russia and looking at alternate supplies, except for Hungary. So at the collective level, there is one state who says, I need Russian energy. I can't live without it. But you guys are saying, well, we're okay. We've sought or we've secured alternate supplies. And I appreciate you're not sitting in Brussels at NATO headquarters or at the EU headquarters, but how do you, as a member state, you look down the table and one member state is throwing the entire collective arrangement off balance? How do you, is this one of these things where you say, this is one, like Yuri said, this is one of the 3 points, okay, we'll relax, we'll give you a relaxation on that. That's one of the 3 giveaways. You know, how and where and when do you make those decisions? Yuri, seeing as how you mentioned it, how might you respond if Mr. Orban were sitting beside you at a conference table and there was diametrically opposed vital national interest?
No, Mr. Orban has his own point of view.
Yeah.
It's the energy security issue. Is going to become very, I wouldn't say vital for Europe, but a very, very important, sometimes critical. Yeah. Why? Because having this dependence on Russian gas and oil for many years is not easy to change. You know, even though at the rhetoric level, it's easy to say that we will stop importing oil and gas from Russia and we will move to American LNG and other alternative suppliers. It takes a while until this process will be effective. If everything goes well, Romania is going to be the main producer of gas beginning with 27, when we will exploit Neptune Deep reserve in the Black Sea. The process is on the way. Everything goes well, but nobody knows how Russia will act and react when we will start exploiting the Neptune Deep reserve. Yeah, because it's at the limit of Romanian economic exclusive zone in the Black Sea. There are alternatives. We have started to implement them, but it's not as easy as we expected.
Yes, of course, the energy security is very important for Poland too. But we recognized these threats a few years ago, and we started to cooperate closer with US. We bought from US a lot of gas and oil, and it's not problem, coal. And we are closer cooperate with Norwich country and together with EU. And we are ready to explore more this in Poland. And we, especially last time, we want to take more green energy. That's at present we have about 10-15% depends on weather from this new energy, and for the next time we are ready to build new modern factory for the new energy to cooperate closer with our friends from EU. The same, because the key areas in Europe and I'm sure that with US, it's very similar too. A little different for the US, but for NATO, for economical proposition, for armed forces, it's not problem. We have big power, big defense system. If we will be together with US, it will be one of the biggest pact in the world. And
Right.
Europe is quite big, rich country for something for defense to make it some system. Especially last time, our army and economy make significant transformation and develop very fast. For example, last time Polish economy is growing about 3.5% every year. That means that Poland at present attended the one of the biggest 20 economy in the world. It's very important for defense system to build new defense system. Yes, for example, we bought a lot of new system from US, and our additional partner is from South Korea too. We bought aircraft, tanks, and artillery, very modern system. And on the other hand, we want to build this new technology in Poland, inside our market, together with American system, EU, and South Korea too. That's I think it's now it's not problem for us.
Okay.
The energy security is going very well
Good.
direction. So.
I have one last question, and I'm sorry, Theo, and then I'll open up the floor. Go.
It's for the fossil energies. It's not a big problem. We found alternatives, like Yuri described as well. American liquid natural gas we buy from Qatar. The big worry in Europe and in our country is the dependence on China when it comes to critical raw materials. For example, in the whole of Europe, 93% of all our batteries in our phones, in our electric cars, all that China. At least 10 years to have a fully developed European capacity, because we have the material in Europe as well, but you still have to get the mine in place, and then you have to open up the mine, have to get into production. That will take another 10 years. And that's really a critical weakness that's very much often overlooked.
Thank you. One last question from me, then I'm going to open up the floor for questions. And it's a short question. Where does the Organization for the Security and Cooperation in Europe fit in this dialogue, or does it at all? Theo?
Yeah, I personally had experience with the OSCE when during the MH17 crisis. I was in Ukraine and I was in charge of that. And I think the place is still, it's a platform for dialogue. And what I found during the MH17 crisis as well, it's a neutral organization. And when you have parties that are in conflict with each other, it can be it's always useful to have a kind of more neutral organization, or at least an organization that's recognized by both parties as an organization through which you can pass your messages.
Okay. Yuri, any last thoughts on OSCE?
I do agree that OSCE remains a valid platform for dialogue, yeah. But at the end of the day, depends on them to increase the relevance of the organization. Yeah, the OSCE has been present in Ukraine after or beginning with 2014 with the monitoring mission. We know that there were some comments from both sides about the neutrality of the organization. I think that at the end of the day depends on them to prove that it's a valid platform for dialogue, relevant, and an alternative when it's is needed. We don't have to forget that OSCE is also present in the Republic of Moldova, is part of the 5+2 format in trying to find a solution for Transnistrian conflict. So OSCE is very important, but it's up to them.
Lech, do you have any thoughts on the role of the OSCE?
I am agree. The dialogue platform is very important for every country, for the whole world, and especially for the Ukrainian.
Okay.
Every time war started from political question, and will be close when we decided what resolved this conflict, this war in Ukraine. But on the other hand, very important influence is from China. China is growing very fast. And we talked about new technology in China. For example, cars is very cheap, these cars. But they export to Europe a lot of electrical cars, very good cars, but very cheap on the other hand.
Right.
And it will be for the future the same the difficult situation. That means that we are join our power, our dialogue, EU and US. If we will be together, it will be easier for us.
Okay. Well, look, thank you very much for that. I'd like to open up the floor, and I would ask them to state their questions as pointedly as they can to either one, two, or all three of our guests. Mike Donachenko.
Yeah, so one of my questions was with regards to the 28-point peace plan coming from the Trump administration. So we kind of see a lot of issues with the 28-point peace plan. I'm so sorry, let me just pull it up here. We see something like talking about Poland's Air Force, that like NATO will have a presence in the Air Force. I'm so sorry. Could you go to the next question and then you can come back to me? I'm sorry, I didn't have the document with me.
Yeah, hey, no worries. Rob Ellis.
I mentioned Nixon and Kissinger in relation to dividing Moscow and Beijing, and I've been thinking about Russia a lot lately, and about having, from the American perspective, about having a land power in Europe and having to fight this potential fight this war. Is it worthwhile considering from the European perspective? What is it going to be like when Russia is no longer the antagonist or the boogeyman, let's say? What does it look like? Or is it possible to begin to imagine a larger, I want to say a supranational federation where Russia is included in this larger European consideration? I'm asking from the North American side. What does it look like to get us towards that political state where we can move beyond this sort of Europe versus Russia in relation to, you mentioned China and the difficulties coming up with the resources? I guess I'll leave it there.
Is your question directed to anyone or all three of our guests?
No, it's a general European question, because I imagine like each nation will have its own perspectives, like as previously mentioned.
Well, let's start with Yuri.
Very, very interesting question. Yeah, I will try to answer like that. Yeah, sooner or later, this war will end with an, let's hope, an fair peace agreement. Yeah, at least for the moment, because I've said many times, speaking about victory, it's very it's a sensitive issue, because what means victory for the Ukrainian side doesn't mean victory for the Russian side. Yeah, when this war will end, the relationship between European countries, I wouldn't say EU, some European countries and Russia will be different. Yeah. And especially will the relationship between Germany, Italy, France, and other economic powers will be different. Let's look at the evolution between the relationship between Russian Federation and United States. Before Alaska, we spoke about one relationship. Now it seems that the diplomatic dialogue is going on quite well. They have agreed on reopening their diplomatic missions in Moscow and Washington, so on and so forth. Yeah. So it's so definitely we cannot speak about the same relationship as being before, but sort of diplomatic dialogue will be in place.
And I guess if I could kind of add on to that, as far as I'm seeing it, again, not to repeat the 20th century, but as far as not just the peace agreement with the Ukraine right now moving forward, but I mean to say, especially for the popular imagination, what is it like to have a political reality, like a sea change, where not to expect the Russian to be a liberal Democrat by any means, but rather to understand that Europe integrated, where they have their separate national interests respected, would also include that piece for the Russians, where we can find ourselves from a narrative approach, being able to speak about finding the middle ground, where we're not just keeping the embers from being too lit, let's say. So how do we get the higher political perspective? How do we stop fighting the Russian bear in our imagination, I guess?
Let me put it, excuse me, please tell.
Okay. I think the answer to your question is that I much earlier see pigs fly in space. And what I mean with that is that what you're describing is an ideal situation, a rosy world, and that's not going to happen, not at least now. The trust in Russia is completely gone due to the aggressive politics we had. And I think that's good to see. And you saw the biggest change even in Germany. Germany had a policy for years, Handel durch Wandel. They said, if you want to have a closer cooperation with Russia, you have to have stronger European ties. And we invited them in the NATO. There once was a NATO-Russian Council. But clearly, we see a country that's not democratic, that's violating all principles, and it uses aggression to get extra territory. And the biggest European fear is that once the Ukraine is solved, then they will address their threats more to the Baltic states, parts of Poland. And I think the biggest ball is now up to Russia to really have a change in leadership up there, and then we have a new situation and a new policy from which you can start working on.
Okay, I understand that it could sound very much idealistic, and so it sounds like that it will need to be some strategic pragmatism, let's say. Russia needs to do some serious work before we're able to meet them in the middle ground. Okay, I understand.
Theo, I would take that one step more. It's more than new leadership. It's a new national philosophy that moves away from statism. Looking at this from a legal perspective. But Russia is a statist state. Everything has always been and always will be about Mother Russia. And with respect, you change the leadership. Who's to say that the successor would be any different? I don't know how.
That's what I mean. You need a new policy. And to our American and Canadian audience, don't underestimate how deep these wounds go. For example, a country of Lithuania even when the Second World War was finished in 45, they were already conquered by the Russians in 44, they had a partisan war going on until 1953. A third of the population was deported to the Gulag archipel. People are still getting grandmother, grandfather back from those eastern parts. So in these kind of countries, and I've been there a lot in my military career, in Poland, the same, but Lek can better articulate that. But the actions the Russians did, they have hurt deep, and it's really up to them to change this and make it credible that they really have a different way of thinking and different policy.
Yeah, which leads back to Mike. Mike, I don't know if you got your 28-point peace plan handy,
Yes,
but that leads back to your question. It's a 28-point plan. It may not be a 28-point peace plan. But do you want to take the floor on this?
Yes. So my question was, sorry, I accidentally closed the Axios article in front of me. So the 28-point peace plan, there's two kind of, okay, the whole 28 things is really questionable, but the two kind of large things is point 1 and point 9. So point 1 is your Ukraine's sovereignty will be confirmed. So that is kind of such a big red flag to me as someone that's like looking from a national security perspective, because we have so many countries, like literally everyone in the world acknowledges Ukraine's existence, even like North Korea, and every country acknowledges its sovereignty. Even Russia currently today, while invading Ukraine and occupying territories, they quite literally acknowledge Ukraine's sovereignty and its existence as a state. And they say, oh, you know, Kiev regime and all these different things, right? So how do we kind of come to terms with understanding and kind of partnering with the United States, as someone was talking about earlier, with, you know, partnering and it will become easier to counter Russian aggression? How do we partner with people that in the White House, in my opinion, and I argue, and I think many people do, it's kind of a relative consensus now that these people kind of don't understand exactly what's going on right now in Europe. And point 9 really is just like the hammering the nail in, right? Like point 9 is European fighter jets will be stationed in Poland. So that's like something that I'm just really confused about. Like in this 28-point peace plan, whoever in the White House administration wrote this, or whoever like accepted this to go to Trump, European fighter jets will be stationed in Poland. Like we already have NATO, like Poland's already in NATO. European fighter jets are already in NATO. Like, how do we reconcile communicating with the United States and partnering with them if there's kind of such a misunderstanding of like basic understanding of like international law and national security? That was kind of my question to all the guests here.
Theo, take the floor.
Yeah, my first reaction at 28 plan, we called it initially the capitulation plan. And but basically, and that's the European position and also our country's position, is that there will be no security arrangement without Ukraine or the Europeans being on board. And what you see now is that especially Mark Rubio is really have been putting up these talks. So now the Europeans, the Ukrainians are more on board, but the race is still not run totally. But I think that's the biggest thing. If you whatever you do, the plan also has good points. But whatever you do, you have to have the involvement of the key actors, and you cannot have a Russian-American agreement only where Ukraine is not on board, where the Europeans are not on board.
Yuri?
Okay, first speaking about the first point, yeah, the usual formulation, the standard formulation is independence, sovereignty, and territorial integrity. This is how it's formulated in a normal way, yeah, which seems to me that most probably Ukraine's territorial integrity will not be respected, yeah, if we look at the first point. I do agree with you. There are many good points in among these 28 points. But I would put this plan in parallel with Minsk I and Minsk II agreements. If we look back at Minsk I and Minsk II agreements, they were written in such a way not to be implemented. Yeah, it seems to me that this plan is written in such a way not to be implemented if we take it as a whole plan. And the first example is that after 2 days we are speaking about another plan. Yeah, not 28, 17, we'll see by the end of the week how many points will remain.
Lech?
And just one thing
Oh,
to add.
sorry, Yuri. Yeah, go.
A plan written without Ukraine most probably is not going to be a valid one. Yeah.
I can say that plan which is written outside Ukrainian, and I would like to tell that Poland has the more influence too. Ukraine and Poland, if we should together working about this question too. Independence, sovereignty, integrity is very important for all countries from all the world, especially for the Ukrainian, of course, for my country too, and for you too. That means that is the basic question. The plan for the peacetime for Ukraine and for Europe, for all the world should be written together with our country, Ukraine, Poland, EU, of course, US, and if we'll be agree, it will be better. But on the other hand, very important is China too.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned
has,
you mentioned China before, right?
Yes, and if we will be work closer, if US will be work closer with China and make separate China to Russia, it will be easier. Okay. I think that now, after almost 4 years, this very dangerous situation in Ukraine and in Europe, this wartime, Russia is very weak. If China and North Korea will be not support Russia, it will be no problem for us. Okay. And on the other hand, US, Europe, and of course, Ukrainian has big power. Ukraine has one of the best army in the world. Very good experience, new modern armament, and they use a very good drones system, and some country want to buy this system from US and for Poland, a different Europe country, and I think it will be during short time not problem. And government from Russia, Putin, he watched this problem, and in the short time it will be. We will be ready to sign. Ukraine will be ready to sign the good, peaceful peacetime for the next time for living in Europe, in NATO together. Ukraine and Europe together should be faster.
Thank you. I'd like to give the floor to Ron Thompson. Ron, are you still here?
Yes, you bet. I sure am. Great conversation here, folks. This is amazing stuff. A lot of points that I wanted to make are here. One of the things I'm going to take and make an assumption right off the bat that this 28-point plan and the European counterproposal of 19 points is going to be a non-starter. The European counterproposal already has elicited nothing but radio silence out of Moscow. So that is, to me, an indicator that this isn't going anywhere. Moving ahead and thinking past the failure of this peace agreement, I would say that we're looking at a situation where Trump is going to use that as an excuse. And I've heard rumors of this before, of him pulling the troops, his troops, the American troops out of Europe. Now, it may not happen overnight, but it could be a downsizing in very short order. What kind of an impact is that going to have on the European countries? Is it going to be a positive impact or a negative one? Your thoughts?
Yuri?
Okay, I will start. Just one more comment to the previous discussion. I think that there is another important player, NATO player, a regional player, which has to be taken into account is Turkey. Yeah, Turkey is an important regional player in the Black Sea and at the NATO level as well. Yeah. Speaking about American troops in Romania, in Europe, my point of view is that in operational terms, it doesn't affect. Yeah, it's a strategic message which has to be taken into account, and also it's a message which is going to be used by Russians. Yeah, because from the Russian point of view, is perceived as a weakness of Americans and a forced fracture in the relationship between the US and EU countries or Europe. Yeah, so this is my point of view. It's not going to affect the operational level, yeah, but it's a political message. What was the reason of American troops in Europe? To deter Russians, or an element of deterrence. Was the deterrence successful? I wouldn't say that. Why? Because NATO hasn't managed to deter Russia to take Crimea, to start the war in 24th of February, so on and so forth. So when we speak about deterrence, about the 3C capabilities, credibility, and communication, I wouldn't say that deterrence was successful. Yeah, so this is my point of view about it.
Okay. Luck?
My opinion, if we will be together, EU, US, NATO, it will be no problem for Ukraine, for the peacetime in the world. If we will be divided, and if China will be support still Russia, it will be problem for us. But the biggest power we have, not Russia. Russia every time will be very weak country, very pure country, and finally we should win. It's very important.
Okay. Theo?
Yeah, it would be the Russians' festivities in Moscow in Putin's office when he sees the division between the US and Europe.
Yeah.
And what happened, and this has much larger strategic implications because there's another guy, his name is Xi Jinping, who's also closely watching what's happening now. And because he will look, what will the Europeans do if the Americans withdraw the support? Will they still stand to fight for the values, or will they keep supporting Ukraine? Because, of course, he has in the back of his mind the Taiwan question. And I think that when it looks to conventional means, the Europeans made it clear that whenever kind of truce is coming, countries are willing to contribute to it, to a coalition of the willing force that's coming into place. The biggest question is if the Americans withdraw, let's say if in hypothetical situation that if the Trump administration withdraws its support, and especially the support of weapons to the Ukraine, you might have a short-term problem that Europe needs to fill in very quickly. And I still think there will be a problem there looking at our industrial capacities in our different countries. The will is there. We have the means, but then we come to, again, to this question, what do we need for our own protection? What can we supply to the Ukraine? But for the moment, the support in my country, for example, the support for the whole Ukraine situation is 200%. And I think it would be also, and I think it would be a strategic mistake also if the Trump administration would choose to take its hands off the Ukrainian conflict at all, because like I said, it will only play Xi Jinping more into the cards. And that's also strategically a much more dangerous situation for the US as well. And
Well,
yeah, go ahead,
I'm
Don.
sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry. I think Xi Jinping is looking for an opportunity. He could go straight north and reclaim Vladivostok and those areas from a breaking up of Russia, if that takes the place. Because I don't see any other solution to this thing than we dismantle 150 years of aggression by either the Tsar or Bolsheviks or Soviet Union and now the Russian Empire. Against Europe and all of its neighbors, right? From Georgia, Chechnya, Azerbaijan, all of them.
Yeah, but sorry, Ron, I agree with that China is the biggest threat. And the way things are developing now, it is really coming up on Xi Jinping's plate. Russia is getting weaker and weaker, which means China can exert more influence on Russia. And they also bring themselves in a better position to finish off the Taiwan and to bring the Taiwan case to solution as well. So, and that's why I think that the unity of efforts between the US and EU is the biggest key in order to keep ourselves as a strongest bloc against these power politics countries like China and Russia.
May I just jump in and observe that unity is based on international law, based on treaty regimes. What treaty regimes are there in the Southeast Asia concerning the United States? I don't believe there is any. SEATO, Southeast Asia Treaty Organization, was stood up in the early 50s and collapsed in the 60s. Perhaps the strongest measure of any cooperation there is a Japan-US alliance, or perhaps a AS-UK. But those are not treaty regimes. Those do not have international obligations that have to be answered, unlike treaty obligations in NATO.
So what's the end game here? We have to isolate both Russia and China?
It's a multipolar world, and power politics are back. So the end game is put yourself in the strongest position you can have, as the US, Canada, and NATO and the EU. And Europe is as a weak position right now, but we've realized it. And there's a saying, you don't want to get caught with the pants on your ankles. And right now, strategically, we're still in that situation where we have the pants at our ankles and we're hosing it up in order to have a stronger position and have a more independent way as well. But we value the connection with the US. We want to keep it. But of course, it takes two to tango.
Well, it's an unpredictable situation with the existing president.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
Yeah. All right.
So in Romania, there's a large European base being built, I understand. Is that going to be manned by a European army?
In Romania, last year, 2 years ago, we started to build, to develop, which is going to be the largest NATO base in Europe. Yeah, it's going to be bigger than Ramstein. It's a NATO base, and also inside the NATO base, it's an American facility as well. MK has been used many times during the Afghanistan war, the Iraqi war. It's a strategic air base from MK. It's much easier, is the easiest way to fly to the Middle East and to Africa from MK.
Pretty
All right.
impressive. Thanks,
All right,
guys.
look, we got about 10 minutes left before we should probably wind this up, and I got room, I think, for 2 questions. Kirill, if you're still here, do you have a question?
Okay. It's about your country's broader public mindset. How do you feel? How do you see the changes happen there? Is this adequate to the situation, and is it possible to meet security calls with this type of attitude? Thank you.
Is your question directed to anyone in particular, Kirill?
Anyone who wants to talk about this.
Okay.
So I'm general, actually, in Canadian perspective too.
In my opinion, power is very important against Russia. I thought that our power is really the biggest in the world. For example, in Poland, we have about 10,000, every time we have about 10,000 American soldiers. Yes. We have every time this command system, and we have air defense system for training, for fighting, and to join together and to check this system. Yes. And if we'll have support from US, it will be no problem. If we don't have this support, it will be more difficult. But on the other hand, European countries are very strong too. It will be the same, not problem. Yuri said about Romania has very nice, very big armed forces to build new armament and is making stronger. That means together, if for us it's not bad situation, and I don't afraid about this future.
Okay, thank you. Any last comments before I get on to the last question? And if not, Crystal Lynn, you've been very patient, and thank you very much. Rather than you ask a question on behalf of everybody, I would like to ask you a question. We spoke earlier about vital national interests, and there are certainly a number that are quite obvious. Energy supplies, security of energy is one of them. But is protection of certain communities within a country important? I'm thinking of indigenous communities or diasporas, such as the Ukrainian community or the Dutch community. Well, what is your thought? Is protection of a community within a country a vital national interest? What do you think?
If I may start, we call it in our strategy.
Yes, I do believe so. I believe it is.
Sorry, carry on. Crystal, what were you going to say? Okay, Crystal, you're breaking up. The reception is not good. All right, Crystal, please answer the question in the chat box. And while you're doing that, Theo, did you have a comment on that?
Yeah, your question was about how do you protect the minorities in your society, like indigenous people. It's one of the lines where we call it social stability in the Netherlands. So one of our strategy is how do we keep our social stability at a good level? Because we have the problems with immigration, like we see in other countries, that rises up tensions within the problems with the internet. We have large communities, for example, when the Kurds and the Turks were still at war, we had, if there was a war going on, we had problems in our big cities.
All right. Well, listen, we're running out of time. So I want to thank everybody for their participation. This has been a lengthy presentation, but I think we've done this for the first time, and that is establish some communication between Europe and Canada. And we've got a far better idea of what comprises a national security strategy in European countries. And there seems to be, to varying degrees, a marked difference between how North American countries develop vice European countries, proximity of threat being one of them. On the other hand, vital national interests are a common thread, as Crystal alluded to. So with that in mind, I hope you will come back in January when we will be having representatives, and I may be asking you guys to help me network on this, representatives from the NATO Planning and Planning Committee and from the Policy and Security Committee of the European Council, who drive the Common Security and Defense Pillar. In other words, those are the NATO policy and the CDSP are the two outputs. Let's hear the authors of those outputs respond to comments, and maybe if you three gentlemen can show up late next January, you can ask them directly, hey, I gave you this, but that's not what you gave me back. So that will be a healthy dialogue. In the meantime, thank you once again for showing up. I hope that you have a safe December with family, and let's leave it at that. Karen, any last comments?
No, I think this was a fascinating discussion. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for being present today, and thank you for all the thoughtful questions. It was a really fascinating dialogue, and we're really privileged to have the three of you with us. So thank you so much, and we look forward to seeing everybody again in January.
All right. Well, thank you. Good day, good morning, and good night, and have the rest of a good day.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. All right. Cheers.
See you again.
See you.
Black. Joy.